Hi everyone, my name is Pedro Catela. I'm an audio engineer and teacher at BIM Manchester and a doctoral candidate at Durham University. To give you a bit of background, the focus of my PhD is on trust in student-teacher relationships in creative arts higher education, a topic that I found of interest nearly a decade ago. Given the lack of research around trust in popular music, I'll try to draw from a wide array of available literature in the hope that I can make the relevance of the topic clear and interesting to you. In this paper, I argue that while trust between student and teachers is a significant element of students' move towards developing as whole persons, their creativity, their achievement, the definitions available to us in past research are, at the very least, atomistic, and that a new, integrative definition of trust is necessary to fully represent the student experience and perceptions in popular music higher education. So, why do we need to talk about trust in this context? The topic of neoliberalism and marketization of higher education has been widely discussed in current research. It influences all aspects of academic life for all those involved in it, reshaping the value of a degree to focus on market requirements and employability of graduates. This has had a knock-on effect in popular music as well. The change to a student-consumer hegemony, the marketization of higher education as a post-consumer good, has placed competition for both student numbers and their satisfaction at the forefront of universities' goals, to which including the student voice has become imperative. Having said that, whether we have actively encouraged the student voice enough or merely paid lip service to the idea is a debate for a different time. We have, however, seen great research on how neoliberalism impacts higher education and popular music in particular. From Rich Hall's discussion of undergraduates' perception of value to Tom Parkinson and Gareth Smith on the need for an epistemology of authenticity, the debate on how we manage market values whilst promoting social justice, cohesion, and equality is very much alive. In this conversation, there is room to consider the impact of trust in teacher-student relationships, and I believe this is important for two specific reasons. The first is that higher popular music education is a context where there is a focus on constructivist and socio-constructivist approaches to learning. These approaches often require more considerations for individual students as opposed to massified strategies in order to help develop their creativity and critical thinking. To illustrate this, I wanted to share with you a quote from an article by Jackie Wiggins. From a constructivist perspective, arts learners need to engage in an art form in ways that are authentic to the ways artists in that field actually work, and feel empowered enough in the situation to be willing and able to bring their own ideas to the process. I want to draw particular attention to the words empowering students to be able, not just willing, but able to bring their own ideas to the process. This is in concordance with other studies that have noted teachers who focus on the development of their students have a nexus of core values, one of which is trust. I have no doubt that all of us who teach undergraduate higher education go to great lengths to create an environment of belonging in our classrooms. In performance modules, this is particularly important as interactions between peers and teachers help to develop not only creativity, but other transformative concepts such as communication, confidence, and what Anthony Gritton calls trustworthiness. This constructivist approach is an element that universities like to advertise. Marketing materials for higher popular music education in the UK often include terms like small groups, workshops, seminars, or tutorials to underscore the importance of working closely with experts and professionals in the industry that students are trying to enter and navigate. These terms, interestingly, are also part of an extensive study conducted by Gerda Hagenauer and Simone Vollet on teacher-student relationships in higher education, where they emphasize that both effective and support dimensions of this relationship are more likely to form in courses that make extensive use of, you guessed it, workshops, seminars, small groups, and tutorials. Hagenauer and Vollet also allude to the issue that these relationships may form inadvertently. When teacher-student relationships are shown to significantly impact student engagement, achievement, and satisfaction, and the likelihood of developing this is prominent in popular music, we should strive to understand them past the notion that our real-world or academic expertise is the only grounding that students require for trust. In this context, addressing trust between teachers and students can also help to challenge some of the market forces that position students as consumers and receivers of education, and universities and teachers as service providers. The second reason as to why we need to talk about trust in our context is that programs are also more likely to have students that, for one reason or another, need this trust. An article by Alison Bacon and Samantha Bennett raises the issue that students with dyslexia and other learning difficulties are more likely to choose art as an undergraduate degree, and the numbers seem to agree with them. In the UK, just 2 years ago, a cursory search of the UCAS website returned 117 courses in popular music performance across 38 education providers. Today, that number is 185 courses in 51 institutions. While it's very positive to see students and institutions embrace popular music as a legitimate academic career, it also requires us to ensure that those students have the necessary support to accomplish their studies. Concurrently, the Higher Education Statistics Agency report of 2018-2019 further shows 14% of students having a known disability, whereas in the case of universities specializing in music performance, the numbers seem to be between 20 and 35%. Some institutions include this in their marketing materials, such as Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, reporting a higher number of students with disabilities than the general population, while others explain how they are committed to bringing more students from underrepresented courses into their programs. On this topic, Patrick O'Keefe and Stephen Roberts delineate students with disabilities in what they call at-risk and non-traditional groups. And we're seeing universities target these groups specifically in their marketing materials more often. Several recent studies seem to agree that these groups are progressively entering higher education at a higher rate, and we should consider the implications for popular music. A particular subgroup within these categories that also reports a higher number of entry into popular music courses is of first-generation students, which has been picked up by the media as well. This is a new metric for which there is little empirical evidence as of yet, but there is some anecdotal data that the first port of call for first-generation students to understand how to navigate higher education is their teachers. This is a useful insight into the importance of effective teacher-student relationships founded on trust. I don't mean to criticize widening participation strategies here, as it is positive that institutions are striving for equality and representation, and this is perhaps one of the benefits of neoliberalism in our context. I merely wanted to draw attention to the likelihood of an overrepresentation of at-risk and non-traditional students in popular music, as defined by O'Keefe and Roberts respectively, and that these groups require special attention in the issue of trust, since they are more likely to lack the social and cultural capital to navigate higher education successfully. As I'm sure it comes to no surprise to any of you who teach, the policies enacted by our government and our own institutions sometimes fall short of what students need, and it is most likely through conversations with those students and the development of that trust that we become aware of their specific challenges. The overrepresentation of at-risk and non-traditional students, coupled with the likelihood of developing effective and support dimensions of trust between teachers and students, makes popular music a specific area in which the discussion of interpersonal trust is necessary. So, how do we talk about trust in popular music higher education? Well, the concept of trust has been widely discussed in compulsory education. From Stephen Brookfield in The Skillful Teacher to Megan Shannon Moran or Dimitri van Melle and Mika van Houte, the link between trust and achievement is well documented and argued by people far smarter than me. Their research is useful, but with clear limitations. We cannot ignore the difference in teaching individuals in a compulsory system to teaching individuals that have opted in themselves, paying high fees into our degree programs. This changes the nature of any trust dynamic and requires more context-specific considerations. We can and should, however, consider the implications and impact of students' experience in compulsory education on their willingness to trust other academic systems, including our own. If we focus solely on higher education, we come to the conclusion that there are two prevailing definitions of trust discussed in current research: the interpersonal dimension and the consumer dimension. I don't think this will come as a surprise to any of you. The interpersonal dimension is where we find multiple variation of Annette Bayer's work in 1986, Trust and Antitrust. Here's a common example of a definition of interpersonal trust: an individual or group's ability to be vulnerable to another party based on the confidence that the latter party is benevolent, reliable, competent, honest, and open. Bayer's influence can be seen in the use of the words vulnerable and confidence, which are central to her argument. In the context of popular music, there is vulnerability in exploring creativity and performance in front of peers and teachers, and confidence that will not be met with scorn or indifference. The consumer dimension of trust is often discussed as it pertains to the brand of higher education providers. Here's an example: the degree to which a student is willing to rely on the institute to take appropriate steps that benefit him and help him achieve his learning and career objectives. Notice the difference in language between one and the other. The latter uses transactional terms that move away from the effective aspect of vulnerability and confidence towards reliance and objectives. But as Annette Bayer points out, we can still rely where we no longer trust. If concepts such as vulnerability and confidence are implicitly present in the consumer dimension, then the literature doesn't seem to take them into account, perhaps in an attempt to make a complicated topic more manageable or measurable. In the consumer dimension, however, trust has been widely demonstrated to mediate the relationship between perceived service quality, brand image, and behavioral intentions in higher education, and has been shown to directly influence student satisfaction metrics. What's perhaps most interesting is that in the current research, these two dimensions of trust never seem to overlap. They aren't even discussed as one having influence on the other. My argument is that this is unrealistic, and these dimensions should not be discussed in an atomistic, compartmentalized way. Students develop both interpersonal and consumer trust during their degrees. They embody both at all times, and either can influence how decisions are made at any given time. This is evident from a preliminary analysis of a small number of interviews conducted with students from different higher education providers, of which I would like to present 3 examples to you. Here are a couple. There are a number of great and knowledgeable teachers here. However, a number seem to only have been hired to promote the university because they are or were famous. Just because someone used to be a pop star doesn't mean they are a good teacher. As an adult paying high fees, it is not uncommon to feel shortchanged here. The third one, I think, is even more telling. I told them I wanted to defer, and they came back and said, "We're the ones that decide if you can defer or not, but I have the money. If they want my money, they'll let me do the year again." As Henry Giroux says, trust has been commodified. And we can no longer ignore that in the hopes that students who have the power to influence policy and practice will see our good intentions beyond our words or actions towards them. So what do we need to talk about trust in popular music higher education? This is a complex and complicated topic. far-reaching in interpersonal and consumer dimensions. In its ability to both empower students and influence achievement and satisfaction metrics, trust can be seen to either hinder or advance neoliberal ideals. This is perhaps indicative of a changing ontology of trust and the way students and teachers embody the concept. And a new ontology requires a new definition, one that considers both interpersonal and consumer dimensions without being insular or constrained by either, and provides an integrative perspective of trust as experienced by both teachers and students in popular music. As we work towards this new definition, empirical research from a multitude of contexts is vital. In order to fully understand the trust dynamic from both students and teachers, my own research will likely utilize an ethnographic approach, looking into both pre- and post-1992 universities in the UK and conducting situational field observations to explore how teachers and students develop their relationships and how certain factors, such as background, policy, and support, may have an impact in these interactions. Finally, of the few conversations with other researchers, such as my supervisors, it has become increasingly clear that the current situation regarding COVID-19 and isolation may further impact the development of trust, and this may have consequences for some time to come. If we rely heavily on body language, interaction, and physical space to form relationships with our students, we may have to find other means to ensure that they feel empowered to bring their own creativity and critical thinking into our lessons. That's been my presentation. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.